we start our presentation, is that Asheeka and I met each other over 20 years ago as we were both in the same faculty in a school, and we were English teachers, or we are English teachers, and we were working in the context of an area where there were high levels of multicultural students, so students, as you were describing, who had become either first language to Australia or second language speakers based on their parents being immigrants. And we were working with a boys' school at the time, so we were both in the faculty of a school that was a single-sex boys' school, and we were teaching English, English literature, and English studies. And what we both realised was that we felt like we were the only ones teaching literacy in the school. So we were teaching the syllabus at the time in terms of our requirements, but we were teaching the boys how to read and how to write and how to code, so that they had skills beyond just learning about poetry and novels and things. But our colleagues, our other faculty colleagues, were not teaching literacy. Not specifically grammar or punctuation, but not even subject-specific literacy, such as science or maths or visual arts. And it became a frustration of ours as not only colleagues, as English teachers, but as educators, that in this context of education, we had colleagues who refused to acknowledge that our students needed to be taught fundamentals in order to actually learn the content that they were going to be, learning and teaching, and so that they could apply that beyond the school. So in the school context, we attempted to educate our colleagues about teaching literacy, and we failed miserably. We did, because there was a resistance, a real resistance. And the research, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a moment, the research would suggest the reason that there is a failure on other subjects to teach literacy is because the teachers' own literacy levels were low. So we found that some of our colleagues didn't want to teach grammar and punctuation because they themselves did not have a good grasp of, grammar and punctuation. And so, for the love and passion of what I like to call sneaky professional development of teachers, where we flipped it basically and stopped teaching or advocating to teach our colleagues about how to teach reading or writing in the classroom. And we focused on the empowerment of vocabulary, because we thought that was non-threatening to our colleagues. That if we could say to them, if you explicitly teach vocabulary, believe it or not, the reading and writing would increase.
It creates a greater buy-in because words are common across all our KLAs.
Yeah. So historically then speaking, literacy has been, as we know, a door or window into social mobility. And everybody that I've heard in presentations over the last 2 days has spoken a lot about mobility, and the need for our students to have that means that they have to be able to read and write. And so in the last 15 to 20 years, there has been a shift in the way in which we teach literacy, and technology has certainly improved that. So we are, technology has driven the increase of access to teaching literacy. However, vocabulary did not progress in the same way. And what ended up for us was a very traditional way of teaching words and spelling tests and word banks. And so teachers across the different key learning areas still have that very static and antiquated way of teaching words. At the beginning of a unit, they would just list all the key words. Students would write it down in their books and occasionally reference it as a teacher in the classroom. But we found there was no transference, that the students themselves were not using the words in authentic or appropriate ways. And so we decided to challenge that in our research, in our work, as well as in the project that Asheeka and I are doing in school. In high school, as I said to you before, the teaching of specific reading and writing fell upon the English teacher, and that certainly now has changed. In Australia, we now position literacy as an Australian expectation of being cross-curricular. That means that every teacher needs to be actively literacy teachers. Now, that's the policy, right? There is a real uptake in the Australian context of placing literacy in every subject. There still is, however, as we know, a lack of proficiency of the teaching staff and a lack of confidence or knowledge. So we can understand, and the research clearly says, that there is a strong link that exists between vocabulary knowledge and reading comprehension. We know that. You know, in a colloquial way, the more words you know, the better reader you will be, and ultimately be able to write better. So we know this exists. Over the last decade or two, there's been some real evolution around the way in which we can teach vocabulary that actually can have an impact on our students, going away from just word banks and spelling tests. I'm going to take a little step back. Why is this so passionate for someone like myself and Asheeka? Because we know, according to the research, that there are still very high levels of low adult literacy. And that means and translates to a loss of income, a lack of social inclusivity, a lack of options and progression. And so because we still have very high low adult literacy levels, we are tasked in an educational setting in high school to really ensure that we do not fail to give these students the fundamental literacy skills they need. And that at the core of that is empowerment. At the core of that is coming out of school and choosing whatever pathway. It could be a vocational pathway, it could be a higher educational pathway, it could be an immersive one, you know, a combination of those experiences, but that they have choice. And that means empowerment. They have autonomy over the way in which they're going to go. A little statistic here. I did set this statistic to be in Australia, but in 2012, for example, the PIAC reported that around 15.5% of adults aged 16 to 65 was still assessed as having low literacy levels. I didn't include the table because I didn't want to offend countries in terms of rankings, but there was some significant low European rankings in amongst that table. Let's situate it in Australia at the same thing. According to PISA, Australians also had a very low ranking in terms of literacy levels. For example, 46.9% of Tasmanian women have the lowest literacy of functional or levels of functional literacy of all Australians. So there is still a really large disparity. And that's why as educators, we really are very passionate about ensuring that we are explicitly addressing this issue. So comprehension is complex and involving obviously a coordination of multiple cognitive processes and knowledge, but word knowledge and reading comprehension are intimately linked. So we think and believe, and our research is telling us this in our program, that if we can get our teachers to really focus on levels of vocab and ones that can have transference between subjects, that means that our students will be able to then access those words into their reading, to reading and obviously to their writing. This leads us to our work. So we have decided to really focus on teaching language as a category, because particularly for some students, they want to know where the word fits, and if it has a logical category or understanding, we've started to find that our students, because they can name where the word belongs to or which category it fits into, they are able to therefore understand its function and its purpose. So the work from Beck, McEwen and Kukan talks about the explicit teaching of vocabulary by identifying high frequency, academic, technical and low frequency categories. Academic words are words common across domains in academic texts, as exemplified by pockets as an actual list. So there's an actual list that you can access. But we've taken it one step back and we've asked our teachers to access the list, but own the words. So which words are common across Australian contexts, across the Australian curriculum. And so the three levels, as you can see here, Level 1 is the conversational word. And we all know that our students are very proficient. I call them street smart. Our kids can talk quite confidently at that conversational way. And that's because that's their strength. It's their social inclusion. But unfortunately, our children then bring that into the school setting, into other formal contexts. So when they're meant to be writing for it, and if you look at a university level, academic papers, they don't know how to shift their language. And so a lot of that conversation comes into their written papers and into their formal responses. So academic tier 2 is the academic words, high frequency words that appear across domains and that characterize text rather than conversational language. And our tier 3 are our technical words, we call them jargon, and they are subject specific or topic specific words. Our teachers naturally teach the jargon, so they will not teach it, but at least highlight the jargon word. They don't do so well at the high frequency words that connect the content and subject specific words. And because there is that gap, the lack of meaning can be, in terms of the fluency of meaning is lost.
Okay, so where does this sit within the wider framework of the project that I'm doing at my place of employment? So the long-term goal is to improve our students' ability to read and also write. So the two grounded theory frameworks that we're going to come from is the graphic on your right-hand side, the coloured one, which gives us, so our school, my school is a 5 to 12 school, and when the students come to us, we understand that there's an expectation that they have achieved levels 1 to 3 in the instruction from K to 4. So one area that we really start to work and drill down on is vocab instruction. Vocab instruction that fills in with the Discover reading rope, and you'll see vocab is maybe the second one down, which requires our students to have a breadth and precision when it comes to understanding text and then be able to replicate that, I guess, in their own writing. All right, so what have we discovered? So Rose mentioned this earlier. One of the things that we've discovered is our teachers do feel ill-equipped to undertake any form of literacy instruction. I think it's really important to mention here that it's not so much the fact that they aren't interested. A lot of this has to do with the educational policy of Australia, specifically post 1970s, that actually shifted away from teaching young children literacy, basics of grammar, and so forth. So I wouldn't completely say that it is the teacher's fault, because a lot of universities and their teacher education don't prepare teachers for this either, unless you are somebody who's an English language specialist. So as we can see here, this particular project will target 3 faculties that are outside of the English, literature and language stream. And the hope of this project is to, one, break down the walls across faculties to understand that you're not alone in the struggle, and then also to create greater collaboration and communication to show that it is something that everybody struggles with. So, academic project.
Yeah, so to give you some context, Australia has 2 national diagnostic assessments. The first one is across all of Australia. It's called NAPLAN, and it's the National Assessment Program for Literacy and Numeracy. And it's an annual national assessment for all students in years 3, 5, 7, and 9. And the other one is the high school certificate. So basically, that's the matriculation assessment. So these 2 assessments are diagnostic and summative, and they do really force the way in which we look at teaching in Australia.
Okay, so we are using an action research model. That's the Timberley model coming out of New Zealand. And initially in the scanning phase, we found that we're actually using that plan as a diagnostic tool. And here are some reasons why vocab is the area that we plan on targeting. So what you see here is the writing skills, and I think again on your side over there, you'll notice that there is a school score, there is this slight school score, and then there is our state score. One of the things that we need to look at here is for a school that is a fee-paying school, results need to align with other schools as well. Here is an example of what the marking criteria looks like for vocab. And what you see in the fourth column is the score students receive when they do a written piece of writing as part of the external testing, and then the percentages where these students score. The key thing to keep in mind is it showed us a deficit in terms of accessing the higher bands, which is the 4 and 5 bands. And the criteria just basically says to access that, you need to have a range of words and precision of words as well. This is the NAPLAN marking criteria. The 10 elements of what they're marked out of, and you'll see that vocab is up there again, range of precision, choice, and language. The 3 teams that we chose to go with were PDHP, Geography and Science, based on the instructional hours at a Year 8 level, and also in terms of when we map vocab against the reading section of NAPLAN at state level. The thing to keep in mind here is we've got diagnostic tools, instruments, an external measure for Year 7 NAPLAN. Year 8, they do not get tested, then they get tested again in Year 9. So our plan is to test our current group in Year 8 next year to see if there's been a growth as a result of understanding the process. So the process itself, in the first instance, 3 faculties participated in a 20-minute subject-specific writing task. And then once they did that, we sat down together and looked at coding the words according to the tiered systems. So I'm not going to go into the details, but what you'll see here is you're interested in the measurement that's happening on that side. And what you'll see there is irrespective of whether you're dealing with a student who can't write a lot under 20 minutes to somebody who's quite capable, we are still not hitting a mark beyond 20 or 25%. And that is quite an issue in a school that is predominantly where their first language is English. Now, in doing so, part of the process that we discovered is teachers actually struggled to even break down or categorize Tier 1, 2, and 3 words. So I did a bit of research on this, and you'll see here that the research supports it too. Even experts struggle to differentiate between what could be a Tier 2 or a Tier 3 word, because the system is an excellent way of doing it, but it does require a lot of collaboration and conversation. So I want us to actually have a little look at what it looks like. Sorry, let's go again. So you've got the Tier 2 instruction, which is then mapped again, explicit instruction. Specifically here, it's, we're doing a cognitive science model of principles of instructions, and this is what the lesson plan would look like. So again, courtesy of our science department, it gives you a structure as to how the lesson plans, and then we're looking at the middle row, second down, a very explicit but organic teaching of vocab based on what the students are studying at that point in time.
So this is the video we wanted to share. We have to escape over this. And while Asheeka is doing that, I think what's important is observationally, Asheeka and I have been going into classrooms and watching some of this happen. And we notice that teachers who explicitly stop and ask students what that word means. Do you know what the word means? Do you understand its function, its intention? We're doing better than those who assumed the kids knew the words. So there is an absolute correlation between explicit teaching in the classroom and success in writing to those teachers who are thinking that the students understood the words. And then the students were using them in the incorrect context. So we were really focusing on the professional development. So this is not working. Unfortunately, it's not working. But here, what you can see on the screen was the also copy it. Yeah. So what we were seeing was the head of science faculty working with her colleagues, and they were talking about words that they wanted to concentrate on and focus on for Year 8. And hopefully you'll hear them really talking about longevity if these are the words we're going to focus on in this stage of learning, how will that impact on the diagnostic and summative assessments that the Australian curriculum, the students need to test against? So there was this wonderful moment where the teachers were realising the impact they would have in the younger years on the students' matriculation. So hopefully we can hear it.
So yes, okay, so this specific one is where teachers have already gone through their textbook, done this section of planning, identified and categorized the words into tier 1, 2, and 3. And what you see there is them actually cross-referencing it against the Clark State academic work list to ensure that we're hitting some of those high frequency words that the students can, yes, start learning in year 8, but have a little bit more mileage when it comes up to year 12 when they do their HSC. What happens then is once they have gone through and shortlisted their words in science, geography, and PDHP, the words come back to me, and with the 3 heads, we'll sit down and target roughly about 30 words that we will aim to teach across faculties at the same time. So what you see there is some pictures of 3 different faculties categorizing the words and programming it into our teaching programs. A key thing to mention here right now is science, so maths, science and English in particular are going through a junior school, so 7 to 10 syllabus change, which makes it very easy for us to take our 30 words and program it into our daily lessons. So which is what they're looking at.
It's early days, the project is very much in its infancy.
Yes.
And we hope to be able to share some of our conclusions towards the end of this year in terms of our initial conclusions, and keep developing this not just in one school but across schools. So start to get that cross-school data.
Yeah, so going through the first round of the pilot phase, we can already see that there's some flaws in the methods that we're doing this. For example, the 20-minute writing activity is a timed activity, and perhaps it should be a little bit more planned activity in terms of a workout, which gives us a greater measurement. And then again, perhaps we need to think about how do we roll out words beyond just programming and teaching, but also a little bit more signage around the school and inserting our staff and creating greater buy-in as well.
Thank you.
Do we have time for comments and questions? Maybe not too many, but not big. Please.
Yeah, is that possible to do some peer assessment within students? I mean, use that evaluation criteria.
Oh, in terms of their writing?
Yeah.
As it gets students to identify, and students to go through and categorize tier 1 to 3 words.
Student A and student B for survey, they should their own writing that.
Oh, absolutely. So that is like the long-term plan. But initially, for us to be able to do that, we need to make sure that as educators, we do have a common understanding of how the system works.
Another one. It's not possible to develop some software evaluation software, to teach teachers how to evaluate the writing code.
Okay, yes, I do think there's a potential for that. But one of the things that we need to absolutely keep in mind is there's a difference between having a software do it and garnering a real expertise within our colleagues. So what I mean is, an interesting piece of conversation that came up was one of the teachers made a comment, why can't we get our students to type their responses and then we can get ChatGPT to categorize it for us? You know, and yeah, sure, it's glad to say in device, but where is the actual expertise when you're standing in front of the students and showing them organically in that moment the parameters of language?
Certainly we want to use the technology. I think there's a space and place for it, but what we want to do is ensure the teachers don't become lazy. You know, we want them to actually know and be able to help our students and then harness the tools, be critical of the tools. Yeah.
Thank you. But in listening to your presentation, so I do see a point for having a software And I initially to help teachers. It should be me, it's not anyone.
Yes.
In my experience, students enjoy greatly history of the language when I talk about vocabulary and bring something from Middle Ages or from Latin. It's a great success. Do you address history, etymology, at least the main figures, suffixes, roots from Latin? Do you work with that?
Yes, so definitely, if you look at the lesson plan, it does talk about, you know, the history and the, you know, the development. Can you see that?
So etymology is
Yeah, in the middle. I'll give you an example, more colloquial, a narrative to maybe to, so we were teaching a particular student, I've shared this with some colleagues already last night at dinner, where a student was heard a word and thought it sounded sophisticated, and then proceeded to use this in their written work a lot. And when I questioned the student, what are you trying to say with that word? You use the word allude a lot, right? What are you trying to say? And the student was so honest and said, no, I don't know what I'm saying, but it sounded sophisticated, like I heard it, and so I'm just going to use it. And so there was a moment where we said, no, there are better words. What are you really trying to say? Let's find those words and let's grow your vocabulary so you can be more effective. And so and then we can talk about the history of the word and its word families. We talk about word families. Yeah,
You read my mind.
yes.
So you work with it.
Yes, but again, it comes to efficiency. So it's that confidence. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you for the talk and for the, well, I would like to thank all the speakers and the audience for their participation in the talks and the questions. So thank you very much, everybody. And now let's proceed to the
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
for our session. That's again, I know, I really we could do, you know,
Yes, yeah, it's always.
yeah, because technical is technical,
Yes,
so you
The meaning with
focus on maybe the history of the technical terms and the technology.
the level of math that
Word
we're
hypothesis.
now here.
And I said, is it a T party or a T two?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, it's a hypothesis, it's an alternative. I don't know. It must be.
It could be both.
And that's what we're saying, so it's just. Majority of the time,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you didn't know. Yeah, because tier two, I think as well as university, more general terms, it could be also, even though general is so as being technical,
Yeah.
so maybe one way to solve this would be is to ask your reference people to tell whether it's only tier three, so technical or so you would, yeah, or combination, so you could have course or word would be only T3,
Yes.
only T2, only T3 and no T3 and 2, and yeah, and maybe by using this kind, it's not a skill, but with your multiple you could choose more on a general basis which one
yeah.
you want to teach.
What we've done is just
Yeah.
actually what like the students to say, oh, this is a tier two word. Oh, this we think it's tier two. We were very excited about the students here. You know what I mean? They were starting to think about the categories. And so
And then that's what I'm
because if you are a teacher, I have to teach you what to do.
and it was like influencing us that
Maybe
we're
they can actually teach you that stuff to just
and
And this is why we do it. Therefore, it starts to impact students and teachers on ways to come from.
And when managers start listening to judgment,